Absolutely. So I've been meeting with RBHA and RPS to ascertain the status of their audits. RBHA is very close. I'll be meeting with them on Thursday. They believe that they will be finished by Friday, but that is if everything goes right. So Thursday is essentially my check-in to make sure everything has gone according to plan so that they can be done on Friday. So I expect to have their opinion on Friday. For RPS, I met with the external auditor. The two members, Mr. Cameras and Ms. Payne, were not available when I met on Monday, but I met with their auditor. He indicated he was expecting to get an updated draft on Monday. I'm not sure that he's received that. I will be meeting with him again on next Monday because he doesn't have a way to predict when he's going to be done because he doesn't have an updated draft. So we're going to meet again next week, see where they are. He felt confident that he would be done in December, just not able to give me an exact time.
Remind me what the statutory deadline is.
The statutory deadline is December 15th for the APA. So what I will do is reach out to the APA. I have a contact there. I'll let them know that the city is delayed because our two component units have not submitted their audit. And generally that works out well. What they're really doing is trying to keep all of the localities on a timeline so they can get out their comparative cost report. So usually if I'm in sometime late December, early January, the city of Richmond can be included in that report. Anything further delays takes us out of the report, which is not good for anyone. So they generally, if you give them notice, they will continue to work with you and allow you to submit and still be included in their comparative cost report. So we're working actively with the state to let them know what's going on.
And what's the deadline for the state again?
The state, December 15th, which is Sunday. So essentially I'll reach out to them today. Then the audit committee is aware of the status.
Did I understand you to say that there's a different timeline? We don't get it in by a certain time, we won't be included. Is that the December 15th date? Or?
They want everyone to comply with the December 15th, and that's the statutory deadline.
Right.
They don't give you another deadline, but if you let them know and say, hey, we're going to get it in, they will generally allow you to be included in that report. I don't want to go any further than December to ensure that we're included.
I'm sorry, yes, Christy.
So I heard the back and forth between you and the schools. I mean, do they understand the
They absolutely understand.
urgency?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Churchman was our former auditor, so he's very well aware of the deadlines.
Right, and the leadership.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Superintendent's aware.
Okay.
He actually attended the previous meeting.
Okay.
They're aware that both agencies have had some staffing issues.
Okay.
But right now, we've done everything we can.
Right.
We're just waiting.
Right. Thank you.
So, so obviously, after we get those audits, they need to put the numbers into their ACFR, and then we got a process that we go through our quality control process. So that's kind of the closed down process. So we're going to wait for those and move as fast as we can when we get it in. So I had this slide in here when we were released before we had the ACFR. I don't think anyone's been provided with the ACFR. There's a hole in it.
Yeah.
But as far as this is, I'm just going to leave this slide for you guys for referral of the different segments that are in there. It has the different accounting. So just to kind of in closing from a audit scope scenario, we are, I should have mentioned this. I got ahead of myself. I do have Christina Lowe, one of my associates, on the line. I know we didn't do introductions, but I just wanted her to be here. She's the one that did the detailed work. She wanted to be part of the proceedings. So So anyway, so the audit scope is to audit the financial statements and also to do the single audit, federal audit. We are right now, as we said, prepared to issue an unmodified or clean opinion. Granted that everything comes in right from the other entities. As far as the financial statement result, there are two findings there's currently still being held and repeated. But I have a little time here. I do want to reconsider a couple of things because this committee's asked me last time about the miscellaneous vendor report, and I know the city auditor did an entire report on that, and I wanted to digest that a little better, see if we can relieve that or not. And then also, I know that in the cash area, there has been significant improvements along the way. We did have instances where I think one of the accounts were reconciled. I think it was like a June to September type of thing. It took a little bit of time. So I just want to reconsider that and see if those should still be at the degree of finding that it is here. So some of the required communications, the financial statement of the responsibility management, our job is just to perform an audit on it, inform an opinion. In the context of what we like to say materiality, we don't verify that every transaction is right, but we do sampling and the procedures necessary to determine that they're materially accurate when they're presented. Management is responsible for the selection of all the accounting policies, and when you get the report, those will be documented in note 1 of the financial statements. As far as difficulties during the audit, we had no difficulties during the audit. Obviously, the missing pieces are good. As of right now, there's no uncorrected statements, and I have to preface that as date because the other one could provide a misstatement, summary of those misstatements that they have. And then also correct the misstatements we had done. We did not have any disagreements with management during the audit. Management will be providing us a signed representation letter when we're ready to date the opinion, which is after all the evidence is received. So they'll provide us a rep letter, and that will be provided to this committee in the letter, a representation letter, and a governance letter that we give you. And we didn't have to consult with any other accountants on any accounting matters that before we engage. So other than what I've just presented here, that I'll stand for any particular questions you have about our process or the process that needs to happen until we release.
Questions from the members of the committee?
I have one. Are there any significant changes from last year to this with regard to policies or formulas for estimates? No. Okay.
Last year we had a lot deal with the subscription-based information agreements. This year we really had a standard that was impacting that needed to be addressed.
Okay, thank you.
You indicated you had no difficulties performing the audit. Did you have good cooperation?
Absolutely. It's good. We got a real good working relationship, I think, and I give a lot of credit to Christina and David because I think under Sheila, they have a pretty good relationship of making sure information is moving back and forth.
And the second question relates to the report on internal controls. My recollection is that usually comes out along with a single audit. Where your report on internal controls is issued.
Well, it does come with a single audit, but I have to release that 60 days after I release the financial statement.
Okay.
So usually there's the yellow book or what I call the government audit standards report that usually will come with the financials as well. And then it'll also be in the single audit report. I think I presented here with the
It's
single
not
audit.
part of the annual financial report.
I don't think that we put it into the state.
We did.
Okay.
That varies depending on the client.
And I gather you are reevaluating whether you will treat those as significant deficiencies.
Yeah, because there's, once we had the issue and obviously they're not 100% resolved, but then now one of them's a lot less. And I want to look at the report. Christina and I were talking about the report that you guys put out, and some of those miscellaneous vendors are necessary use vendors. And so it gives a lot of volume to that particular account. That is a risk, and I know that we tried to ask to have internal controls to be established to help mitigate the use of that vendor code to be able to, feel comfortable with the internal controls around it. Again, the real risk of that is that that's the vendor code that is used for things that are somewhat of a temporary nature that doesn't go through the whole vendor setup process. And so I just want to get a good understanding of the procedures that the city auditor performed around it and take a look at what's being used again.
Any further questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing the final report, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yes.
Me too.
Thank you.
Okay, next, the audit office. What's going on, Leon?
Good afternoon, Audit Committee members. Thank you for joining us today. Before we go into a staffing update of the office, I just wanted to take a minute to publicly acknowledge and thank the City Auditor's Office staff for their hard work and dedication over the last year. In my first year as City Auditor, I've shifted our approach to a more in-depth and detailed audit of taxpayer dollars. And in implementing that approach, it has meant a lot of time, energy, effort, and long nights for my staff and I to really get there. And again, so I just want to thank them for those efforts and reestablishing that new approach in our office as we move forward and ensuring that the City of Richmond receives in-depth, accountable audits of city spending and operations. So on to a staffing update. As was mentioned earlier, we're very, very happy and excited to welcome Rob and Tram to the team. They bring expertise in IT auditing and finance that has already been extremely helpful to the team as we further develop some of our audits, our plans, our continuous audits based on data and our IT audits. However, we still have 3 vacancies in our office. And so we're hoping that we're going to be able to fill those vacancies by the end of the fiscal year. If we're lucky, by the next audit committee meeting, we'll be able to introduce you to additional staff members as we are out recruiting. Now, since the last time we've met, we've completed and issued 4 different reports that we will present today. Those reports are quarterly open recommendations follow-up, which will be presented by Senior Auditor Leanne Castro. Our 2 warehouse reports of DPU's main warehouse and wastewater warehouse, and that will be presented by Deputy City Auditor Yolanda McCoy, as well as Senior Auditor Tony Noel. I'll end with our Streetlights Division maintenance audit report. And that will be presented by Leanne Castro and McCoy. So without further ado, I pass it all to Leanne for our quarterly update.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Today I'm going to recap our fiscal year 25 first quarter follow-up. As part of our review, interview management, personnel, and staff, we review demonstrations of new systems, and we review documentation as departments submit to support the action steps that they've taken to close recommendations. These 9 departments on the slide here are the departments that closed recommendations during the first quarter. Even though these 9 departments closed recommendations, but we are continuing to work with all the city departments continuously to close recommendations. So in the first quarter, which was July 24 through October 24, we started out with 143 open recommendations assigned to 20 city departments. During the first quarter of 2025, we closed 24 recommendations and removed 1 due to no longer being feasible to complete. Some of the recommendations that were closed were related to the collection of underbillings, fire hydrant inspections, and active vendor testing, among other things. There were 4 high priority, 16 medium priority, and 4 low priority recommendations closed. Additionally, there was a total of about $226,000 in recovered costs from prior recommendations. This includes almost $32,000 in recovered duplicate payments from DPU, Social Services, and Parks. And also the Department of Emergency Communications recovered approximately $194,000 in past billings for tower leases. At the end of our review, we had 118 open recommendations left, and of these, 13 are high priority. Again, we want to remind you this is an ongoing process, and we are working with all the departments to close recommendations. So even if they have closing this time around, we appreciate everyone's work. Any questions?
Any members of the committee have questions you'd like to ask?
Not so much a question, but a comment. First of all, thank you for this update. It's great. It's great to see when things get, the number goes down. So Riyadh and I were talking to, I think it was Council Member Jordan the other day about this number of the recovered costs, and just if you all could keep kind of an ongoing tally. I think it would be a really good number to just track and show the progress. And
Yeah, we are. We discussed it. Actually, today was the latest discussion on how we're going to do it.
Okay.
And we'll start tracking those numbers as we move forward.
okay, great.
All of you, I think, have seen the full report that was circulated earlier. And Appendix B indicates, as you said, that there are 116 open recommendations that have passed the original target date. There are, I think, 15 or 16 city departments that have open recommendations past the target date. But the large number of those are through finance and public utilities. 28 from finance and 18 from public utilities. And I'd just be interested in comments from Ms. White and Ms. Bingham on where you guys stand on these open recommendations.
Sure. So I can speak for finance. We've been working with the internal auditor's office. We have 13 recommendations that we have recommended for closure. So we're waiting our turn to for the testing.
Good.
I can speak for the public utilities, so we have a total of 28. 50% of those are in the billing and collections section. We had an audit in March of 2023 for estimated bills, accounts receivable, and those 23 audit items are being resolved, and some of them won't be finalized until we get to our new billing system. One of the things that we talked about in 2023 was the need to launch a new billing. That was successfully launched. We are in a full-blown project mode right now. We anticipate having that billing system up and running. Go live is set for February of 2026. So some of the ones you see in this 14 are being re-engineered inside of that particular process. The contract compliance that we have, where we have 12, some of those have already been, I believe, shown as far as partially completed, and they just need to go through testing with the audit team. I will add that public utilities works with us constantly on these recommendations, go over them, meeting, closing them, and we're shifting to a new approach. We're trying to shift to it. It's a lot of recommendations to shift, but where we show them is not just open or closed, but in process, partial, just so it's a little more clear as to where we are in the process of closing. It's not just open or closed. There's a lot that goes into the middle before it gets to closed.
Good, thank you. Any further questions from members of the committee? Thank you.
We're going to shift the audits to go into the streetlights audit next.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we've completed phase 1 of the streetlight division maintenance audits. Just a little background of the streetlight maintenance division. The streetlight division operates and maintains over 37,000 streetlights in the city. And that division has a significant number of vacancies, so they're using a combination of internal staff as well as contractors to complete operation and maintenance work for the streetlights as well as the electric distribution grid system. So as a part of this phase 1, we reviewed contract expenditures related to the streetlight division. We looked at one contract that was valued at $7.2 million as of October 18th of this year. Approximately $6.5 million of the contract has been spent. The majority of those expenditures are related to the streetlight count project, which was initiated to inventory and document streetlights that are in the city. So our objective for this phase of the audit is to evaluate the expenditures and compare them in compliance with contract terms. We looked at expenditures from January of 2021 to July of 2020. So now I'll turn the presentation over to Leanne. She's going to give you an overview of the audit findings as well as overall performance.
We found that the contract was not adequately managed, which contributed to at least $1.2 million in charges that may be unallowable, overbilled, or questionable. The majority of these findings are from the streetlight count project portion of this contract, where field asset surveyors go out to the field to identify and document details of the city's streetlights. As you see, the largest piece of the cost is unallowable costs. The city was billed approximately $752,000 for administrative and consulting costs for the streetlight count project that were not allowed for in the contract. Labor hours were billed for an assistant project manager, an information technology consultant, and for the contractor themselves. They were billed as if they were field asset surveyors and field asset surveyor lead. However, these individuals were not in that position. The next portion of the $1.2 million is for apparent overbillings. We found the city appeared to have been overbilled at least $161,000 for vehicle, equipment, and labor. This includes at least $38,000 for vehicles that were used in the street count project, approximately $65,000 for equipment for the streetlight projects that was not actually purchased, and at least $56,000 in labor hours that were billed. The final section is questionable equipment costs. The city was billed approximately $289,000 in questionable equipment costs in the streetlight count project for the categories of items that you see on the slide. We could not objectively determine what should be billed because equipment line items in the contract did not contain enough details for us to determine what should be billed and how they should be billed. Additionally, no supporting documentation was provided to validate any of the equipment bills. However, based on our analysis and interviews with the contractor and their staff, we do know that we were overbilled for these items because we know that we were billed for the contractor's employees' personal devices that the contractor did not own or purchase. We were billed for every day of the month, including non-working days such as weekends, holidays, and days when the team was not out in the field collecting data. Additionally, the contractor provided multiple explanations for what was billed and how the billed quantities were calculated, including advising us at one point that they did not know how the daily quantities were billed, how they came up with those quantities. And finally, the same equipment appears to have been billed under multiple line items. In conclusion, we found that the contract was not properly administered or managed. Numerous invoices were billed to the city where the use of additional line items appeared to be inconsistent, unsupported, and lacking reasonable justification. And then we identified $1.2 million in potentially unallowable charges, overbillings, and questionable billings. We referred the results of these audits to the Inspector General's office for any further actions that they deemed necessary. We issued 7 recommendations with 100% concurrence. All of the recommendations were high priority. And to address the issues that we found, we recommended that funds be recouped for the unallowable overbilling and questionable billings, that the department assess contract termination and determine if the contract is barred or suspended, and to improve contract administration, management, and the oversight processes.
We get to questions from the board. I'd like to say. You're headed for different time, right? We started with DPU and went to DPW. Okay, so either or both or Lincoln's, whoever.
I'll kind of pick it up and then if there's more specifics that the team wants to add. But I just want to be clear that this is a very frustrating finding, and we appreciate the auditor's office for doing this work, for identifying the issue, and sending us on a path where we can go and pursue recouping taxpayer dollars that have been overpaid to this contractor. the frustration and anger extends both towards the contractor or obviously fraudulent billing to the city, but also to our staff for the failure to manage. And so, as was stated last week, appropriate disciplinary action will be taken for that. So lots of lessons learned here. Obviously, I'll defer to the team to get into some more specifics, but this is unacceptable. And I believe that this is an area where we're lucky to have an auditor with extensive expertise in the contract administration and oversight space, because I think this is an area where the city needs more work and needs stronger internal controls. As part of our internal control review, this is certainly going to be part of that. But my fear is that this isn't the only place this has happened. I think as the city auditor continues to look at contracts, I fully expect that the team will be fully open and collaborative to identify and when it's found, do everything within the city's power to rectify it, to get the citizens' money back, to handle the contractor appropriately, whether that be termination of a contract or pursuing disbarment, et cetera. We need to be fiercely on top of this. I do think, we'll say it's a bit of an evolution of a challenge. 2, 3, 4 years ago, we would be sitting here talking about the city's challenges with getting contracts out the door, getting them awarded and getting things moving so we can start providing services. I think it's, I'm glad that we're at this phase now where we're really going to dive in on the administration and management of those contracts moving forward.
Comments, questions, anything further? Do you guys have anything you want to add?
Well, one thing that I did want to add, thank you everyone for being here, and I certainly want to thank Aviata and his team. We work with the city auditor's office extensively over the years from a standpoint of the Department of Public Works, as well as our colleagues in the Department of Public Utilities. This was a troubling finding. We don't like to lose $300,000 a year to anyone, be it a contractor, whether it's legitimate work being done that was unauthorized, let alone any work that's that should not have been authorized. There was an oversight. So I want to thank him and his team for being able to point this out to us. And we certainly have put some additional measures in place in order to prevent that in an area that was in fact struggling from a contract management standpoint. Many of our divisions over the years have been strengthened in the areas of contract management as well as program management, and this was not one of those divisions. So it's primarily been a maintenance and operations type of division, but due to various instances, they needed assistance, and unfortunately, they got assistance in a way that went overboard through the apparent results of this audit. So we put additional measures in place. We're looking at also adding an inspector to this section, which will help with regards to reviewing the work that's taking place in the field, as well as that will add to any type of invoice and documentation and invoice approval. So that should help us out in the future with that as well. So I do want to thank the team and second the comments made by the CAO.
And I'll just further add that this particular work straddles both the Department of Public Utilities and the Department of Public Works. There's great coordination in making sure that these things are remedied. We do need to work on, finalizing it for the employee safety, for the employee sanity as well. Where do they belong? Do they belong in utilities? Do they belong in public works? So we need to look at charter changes and things like that that finally put the work where it belongs, and so that we can continue to manage it accordingly. So there is great coordination, again, to Riyadh and his team. I agree with Lincoln. I agree with Bobby. It was a horrendous fine, but I'm glad we found it.
Yeah.
Am I correct? This was a outside service provider who was the only bidder on the work. Is that right? Did we talk about that?
Yeah, we did. We did not cover that in the audit. And I think since we did refer this to the IG, there's just to protect the integrity of any investigative that may take place. I don't think it's a good idea to discuss it.
The question I had is if you have a situation where you've only got one bidder, is there a vetting procedure that's different than in a competitive situation? Just as a matter of city policy.
May I chime in? Yeah. So I believe this was a single source, one entity bid on this contract. There's a responsiveness evaluation on a bid and a responsibility evaluation. We provide information around responsibility vetting to the agency that they have 7 to 11 items that they go through to validate that this contractor, is deemed acceptable for the city. And then it's signed off by that team. It comes to us in the contract file, so the contract can move forward.
A question just around the sort of the scope of this vendor's responsibilities. It looks to me, that the amount of the contract and the amount spent last year is half the budget of streetlight with one vendor. Is that right? Am I right on that?
It's multiple years.
Yeah, it was half the value of this specific contract.
And this specific contract covers both the inventory of streetlights and maintenance.
Yes,
Both.
essentially,
But 55% of it went towards.
yes.
So another relative point, it's 80 to 85% complete, which means 20 to 15% not complete, right? The streetlight inventory project under the same vendor.
So essentially, I think that's probably best answered by administration on the project itself.
I'm just sort of curious about how, it's a big contract, right? Given the whole scope of the department.
So explaining what the contractor was actually doing. It was two sides of this particular contract. One side was staff augmentation with regards to providing power line technicians in order to perform maintenance. That side of the contract checked out just fine with regards to the audit. All of the invoicing and everything was fine. It was on point. The foreman or the superintendent responsible for those particular services did an outstanding job on a daily basis with regards to knowing who was at work and why they were there. The other side of the contract, which was basically that same contractor going out and performing an assessment on our existing inventory, is where the issues came about. So that aspect of how much more work still remains there, yes, you're about right. It's still about 15% of our almost 40,000 inventory. But that's something that we will wind up being able to take up in the future in order to continue with that. And that is where it's not impacting the daily maintenance of our streetlights.
So, and this was the area of the contract where they had to go out for a subcontract because they really couldn't do it, right?
With regards to the assessments, the way that they typically have done things, they may go out and get additional staff to help them with staff augmentation on their own, or they may utilize a subcontract that can be subcontracted to them. At that point in time, that aspect of it.
That wasn't defined. No, they didn't subcontract. They billed us for their contractor.
Oh.
That was unallowed. But their IT,
Right.
their IT consultant. The
Because
business
we
is
needed
IT
it.
consultant. We didn't need it. The business needed it. It's their business's IT consultant. And they built it as if it was a field asset.
Contractors, I think so.
Yes.
So what, does it suggest that they weren't qualified to do this to begin with?
That was not,
Not part of the audit. I get it.
Yes.
I get it. I leave that as a question because the vetting of the contractor, at least for this part of the service.
Yeah, I would say that
was
contractor,
questionable.
I would say that contractor has certainly been doing business with the city for many, many years in terms of their knowledge base. So their knowledge base, I don't think is as much of a question as the way that they build this. And so that's what it's showing, yeah.
Okay, well, there's a, yeah,
But
I think there's
I wouldn't say that we hired the New York Knicks to play the Cincinnati Bengals. I wouldn't say that that was quite, that it was that. I would say that we were certainly building correctly.
well, anyway, it's back to that sort of one vendor issue and choosing vendors that actually have the capability to get the job done, which is questionable to me that whether we did a good job selecting the vendor to begin with for this particular project.
To support what Director Vincent is saying, I do think that the contractor in question here has a long track record working not just in the city, but in the region and abroad, beyond, right, other states, et cetera. Ability to perform was not, it doesn't seem, flagged as a concern. I think oversight to make sure appropriate billing and whether that contractor then, say, took advantage of the situation to pad the bills. It's a different consideration. I mean, the most capable contractor can still inflate invoices, and we still have to have processes in places to catch that prior to payment.
Those of us who've been involved in organizations that have multiple departments or multiple businesses know that not all parts of the overall business are equal as far as management capability or other things. So I don't know that you can go on the general reputation of the overall business when you're selecting for a particular. So enough. I was just curious, given the weighting of this, the whole street lighting mission. It's pretty large.
Yeah, well, I think we can all agree this is a serious finding, but it's also the city is taking it seriously, which it really needs to, and learn a lesson. Any further comments or questions on this report? Thank you, Leanne. Warehouse report?
So we are conducting a citywide warehouses audit for 6 main warehouses that are in the city. We're going to issue this audit in phases, and this phase 1 is related to the main warehouse. The objective of just the citywide warehouse audit itself is to evaluate the inventory management controls and procedures, and then kind of look at the efficiency of the ordering. Are we duplicating things among the different warehouses? So again, this is phase 1 is going to be for the DPU main warehouse, results and findings for the remaining warehouses, as well as overview of the ordering process is going to be issued under the second report. Just a little background about the DPU main warehouse. It operates as an internal service fund, so in essence, the material supplies, when they're purchased, they're recorded as inventory. That gets into our financial statements, and then when they are sold to the other divisions in DPU, they're expensed out. The warehouse has a dedicated staff that oversees the warehouse operations, and they're tracking the inventory in a module that's in our financial system. So now I'll turn the presentation over to Ms. Noel, who's going to go over the overall conclusions as well as the audit findings.
The overall conclusion, opportunities for improvement exist as industry standards and inventory best practices have not been fully implemented. We found inadequate controls, oversight, inventory monitoring that resulted in inaccurate and unreliable inventory data and misstatement of financial statement amounts. The current environment exposes the city to significant risks for error, fraud, and waste that could go undetected. Finding number 1, the inventory data is inaccurate and incomplete, resulting in the inventory value being overstated by approximately $1 million in financial statements and inventory system. 42% of the counted inventory was incorrect and didn't match system noted quantities. Also, as you can see in this picture, these items were delivered directly to the job site. However, they weren't requisitioned out of the warehouse until we started inquiring about them. Finding number 2, improvements are needed in the inventory count process to ensure the accuracy of the inventory records. Under the current process, 26% of the inventory items will never be counted. Finding number 3, inventory monitoring needs improvement to maintain optimal inventory levels and to avoid excessive purchasing. A significant amount of inventory items did not have established minimum, maximum, or reorder points. Finding number 4, safeguarding of inventory needs improvement to prevent deterioration and damage. Building 20 appears to be unsafe. This building was exposed, the roof was compromised and it was exposed to weather elements. Finding number 5, policies and procedures that govern the warehouse and inventory management function are not in place. In conclusion, we issued 13 recommendations, 4 of which were high priority. 1 has since been closed with 100% concurrence. Some of the recommendations include the following: a process to ensure data is accurate and complete, a process to ensure items delivered directly to the job site are requisitioned out of the warehouse timely. Also, to develop, document, and implement an inventory count process and demolish building 20, which has already been implemented. Any questions?
Okay, before we go to questions, did we have any responses?
I think the thing I'll say for this, so the 2 warehouses that we have, they do operate very different, as noted by the audit office. One thing I will say is that we recognized just from the previous audit, I'll give an example of billing audit about a year or so ago. When we talk about reorder counts and making sure that we have things in stock on hand so that we can dispatch work accordingly. We started looking at some of these particular order levels to ensure that meters were in stock, reading devices were in stock, tools that the technicians would use every day. So having this audit come in and help us to ensure that we had, proper procedures in place so that we're going to make sure the proper procedures are in place was well needed. I think we also looked at the staff that was leading this particular warehouse. We lost the individual that was running the warehouse. We since have replaced that person with someone who has strong warehouse management skills and backgrounds. And I will say that I think the auditor's office can concur with us by having that person on site. This was a very clean and quick audit, and that person has certainly been a value added resource to us. We quickly have transferred the second warehouse up under the leadership of the warehouse of this main person. So we recognize we wanted to, quickly capitalize on the decision we made to bring in somebody new. We had a strong background in warehouse management. The other warehouse really focuses on CIP. So we have a lot of regulatory compliance that we're required to maintain, but they operate very differently. But I think staffing was important, making sure we have proper leadership. And I heard auditors say when she was given this report that it could have led to. So I think the things that we've already thought about and things that we put into place help to mitigate what was found. And certainly it is going to help us to be stronger going forward because we now have the right resources in place. So I'm really proud about this one.
I will just add that, reiterate what she said. By the end of the audit, the new individual was in place. Before we even finished with drafting policies, submitting them, showing the changes that are being made, all those recommendations are all in process. We're going through it, reviewing the policy and making sure it was implemented. That's the second phase. When we do that, you have a policy now, you've actually implemented that policy. And that's what our follow-up work is focused on. But I've never seen, at the end of the audit, it was so quick to turn around of new policies to address the concerns. It was excellent.
It was the administration that asked for this audit on a citywide basis because, you know, you'll hear the theme, it was about staffing, right? We have some weak points throughout the organization that it probably will cause because of lack of staffing or competent staff or qualified and untrained staff. Those are areas that we are working on as we've beefed up finance, we've beefed up procurement, HR, things like that. We will not only uncover, but we will fix at the same time, right? It's getting the right people in the right seats, getting training. But, you know, I did a tour of warehouses and the spidey senses went up. And I said, I called the previous auditor, I said, can you do a warehouse audit for us, please? And so while this has taken on a life of its own, we've also started looking at it and how do we combine warehouses, right? Not necessarily DPU because they're a different fund, but we have inventory throughout the city that I think we need to centralize and get our hands around. Weak points, asset management, things like that. We've got to do better with these things. But we spent a few years trying to get people in the right seats. We still have a long way to go. Back to the other contract management, that's a weak area. I've asked procurement and finance and HR to work through, you know, having a training for line staff when they're paying invoices. We couldn't have done that 2 years ago because we didn't have staff in procurement or finance or HR. So it's a building process of finding issues, correcting them.
Any questions? Yeah.
Do you have any other warehouse audits planned?
We're going to cover, the second one is actually another DPU, the wastewater warehouse. And then there's three additional warehouses. Four. That four different combining. A lot of phases to this. And we tried to do it in one and we realized there's no way to do it in one. We had to really look at them separately. And then in the end, kind of combine the concepts of how to move forward together, like she was mentioning, really a overall assessment of all the warehouses, policies, and processes.
This also sounds like a problem that emerged over a long period of time. So this is also a question of not just oversight, but audit cadence. When was the last time the warehouses were looked at?
I went looking back, I'm not sure we had done one.
Never done that?
Yeah. And again, like Sabrina said, this was a request from administration that came in. And when I started, it was the first thing on my list that administration wanted, so we made it a priority to do it right.
It's sort of an administration question is literally how many other unaudited sort of creeping problems are there a few? Are there a million? Do we?
Houses are all.
No, it's a serious question across the city. If I'm the new mayor and I'm saying, whoa, this was a big problem that obviously took years to evolve, and all of a sudden we audited it and went, oh my gosh.
There are quite a few areas.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about.
Welcome,
yeah. Under-resourced, understaffed departments in crucial areas. The training and development section of HR was really non-existent, which does exist now. We put in mandatory trainings. It's, you can't fix everything overnight. Something that occurred over 20 years, it's not going to get fixed overnight. It doesn't happen. It's going to take us years to get this, if it ever was, back to where it needed to be, or at least get to the next point.
Thank you. So my question is, in regards to what's leading, what's the cost of these things? So if you don't have the right person's job to do that, you don't have the right systems in place that work effectively, there's increased risk of something not going correctly because of those deficiencies. And I guess the concern that I have is that when I listen to these audits, it's like they point out things that we need to know. How much are we using the audit's findings and the recommendation for corrective action to mandate priorities as it relates to budgets? Because findings without controlling how we budget to address those deficiencies, keep putting us on the front page. But if we're on the front page and we're not putting the staffing, the resources in place to address it, you know, we constantly come into that place. And so I'm looking for whether or not there's an additional recommendation from the audit committee itself of fiscal policies or budgetary policies that put the resources that's necessary in place to prevent, as we find them, right? And if we are aware of them, because we never have sufficient budget to address the needs, right? And if our audits are not used as a means of setting required priorities, then I'm concerned that we will consistently see ourselves on the front page. And whether or not is the audit committee recommendation as it relates to prioritizing based on our findings. Big question.
I don't know, man. It's clear from these reports that we've heard today, as well as many, many others, there are significant deficiencies in training and supervision. And that seems to cut across a number of city departments. And from what I'm hearing, Lincoln and Sabrina say is they got the message and they understand that and been working on it. I'm not sure there's a whole lot more that the audit committee itself can do other than to acknowledge what our city auditor is finding and reporting all these various reports and making sure we're getting some assurances from the city that they're trying to deal with.
So we try to reconcile and correct all of the findings. You know, if we can't, we tell them why we can't do it. Maybe it's a system issue or something like that. But 100% we try to make sure that we adhere to the findings and recommendations. As far as policy is concerned, that's why we've been strengthening procurement. That's why we've been strengthening HR and finance. Because these are the departments that are at the core of some of this, where they can fan out and provide more training and oversight. So we've just been talking about beefing up procurement's contract area. They're not, the departments pay for the invoices. That's not really their job, right? But they can go in and do spot checks. Finance can do, spot checks on invoice payments, things like that. So we've been talking about establishing an internal control unit. How many people does it need? I don't know yet, probably 3 or 4 or 5. We don't know yet. We've been, I did it in another city and it actually worked rather well. But again, that's also, where do we house it? Is it procurement? Is it in finance? HR is going to do the training. They just went to online trainings, which they didn't have before. So it's stair-stepping for the fixes. So you can pass a policy all day long. We just may not be able to do it till we do A, B, and C first. So we are addressing the issues, but again, these will cost over years. It's going to take us a minute to fix everything. And then we'll have a whole set of new problems.
And if I can just add to what DCAO Sabrina Johar is saying, I think, we always have to give ourselves some grace too. We just came through a pandemic. And I think people forget that we were in a pandemic for almost 4 years. So a lot of what we lost, we've not regained in terms of staffing, in terms of resources, institutional knowledge. A lot of that went out the door. We started rebuilding because of the pandemic. But to there are a lot of people in this room thinking that we have lost a lot. And I think the city is building better. We're more resilient, we're stronger, we're more wiser, we're more aware. And all of that are tools that we will use going forward. But we lost a lot in the pandemic. We really did. And we have to start finding capacity where there is no capacity. So I'll give you a prime example. Just in our customer service department, we have been under the gun for ever since I took over this role, that we don't answer the phone, people can't catch us, can't get us on the phone. When we decided to work with procurement, we now have a BPO, a business processing outsourcing vendor that answers calls for us. And they're answering calls in less than 8 seconds. And that has allowed my staff to be able to be freed up to work on adjustments, to work on backlog, to work on things that we just sat on the shelf because we didn't get to. So I'm excited about the fact that this button I wear every day, we've always done it this way, scratch. We're finding new ways. We're coming out of where we were. We are more stronger. We are more resilient today. And we have to give ourselves grace in that space. We have to.
So just to follow up, thank both of you. Not questioning whether or not we're doing it. What I think would be helpful is that when we are looking at the budget and there are items in the budget that are directly in response to what Bell findings are. And they may be new budget items, but I think it's important that the council respects the fact as it relates to those budget items, that these are the kinds of resources that needs to be placed there and understanding the association with that.
I think that's a very good point, because sometimes when we put in items in the budget, you might just see 2 staff positions for, under these titles. And it's not clear that 2 staff positions are part of our response or even our management, response to an audit recommendation. A lot of times that is the case, but we're going forward with that, but not necessarily tying back to the original cause and purpose, on something like, things that we're doing to align with the city's master plan. That's a very much more tangible public. You can draw the 2 together. This is a little more, it's incumbent upon us to help, tie the 2 together.
And just one last thing, to help us as it relates to how we are viewed, when the audits are published, it's published based on the findings and whatever that is, recommendations. The corrected action that is in place, that is taking place, it's like you said, either with the ones that have, is either open or closed. There's no in between, right? It doesn't leave us with a sense of being accountable and responsive to it when we do it that way. And the same thing with findings when it's published in the news, we hit the front page of the newspaper and it's the report, essentially, that I think from a marketing PR relationship perspective, we can do a better job to really help people to know that how meaningful this is and what kinds of corrective actions in place.
There is a management response to every audit that's attached to the audit. And we're trying to highlight those more as we move forward. And I've recommended to administration that a robust management response is best so that everyone can understand what is occurring, because a lot of these changes are occurring, fixes are occurring. And so we would like to include those even in our summary of the audit. But we're the auditors. We're not the managers. We have to get that robust management response to report on it.
So we can do better to do that, just so that you're telling the whole story.
Thank you.
Joe, can I just make one point? So Sabrina touched on this briefly, but I think the warehouse, this is very interesting, especially since you mentioned it's never been audited. But I do think the bigger picture as you go through the other warehousing audits is the assets, the property assets, and are there things that can be consolidated? I mean, in this audit, you found one that could be demolished and is now gone. So, and just the overall property management, I mean, for the entire city, but regarding warehouses especially.
So that's where it started from, was when we looked at it, we said, okay, we gotta consolidate some of this stuff. But let's figure out what we have.
What we have, that's
Right.
the question. What do we have?
Yes, sir.
Is that following up on Kristen's observation? Looking at this is the main warehouse again, inventory balances. They're up over the past 4 years by over 100%. And 1 year to the next by 50%, the most recent year. So point is, we no longer have $4.5 million of inventory assets. We now have $9 million of inventory assets, right? So a management tool, it's not so much management can audit this, not so much the audit committee, is what would be a goal to have? Oftentimes it's in context of inventory turns. How many turns of inventory would you want to have a year? How does it compare to another jurisdiction? It's another way to manage other than Riyadh's audits. Because we've got assets that are growing, and maybe we don't need so many assets to run the business.
That's our recommendation. But one thing I think is important to mention is the first finding is that the balance is inaccurate. It was off by $1 million in our testing. So I think that one of our recommendations is figure out what the real balance is, and then establish those reorder points, what you actually need moving forward. That's kind of where our recommendations went. Really establish that baseline, and for both, we haven't talked to both warehouses. Establish the baseline, then establish your reorder, your maximum, your minimum, right? And then continue your process and your counts from there to not over order or under order, have the right amount.
I think those are great process controls, and my comment was more to what's the overall objective to manage assets. That's not an audit question. It's how many assets do you need in the warehouse to keep the city running, turning them as responsibly as you can.
And I'll just say, I'm not that I can answer your question, but I will speak for, I have here Richmond Gas Works, and I have the Deputy Director for Water and Wastewater. So water and wastewater, we have a lot of compliance on us, a lot of regulatory. So when a big part of DPU's responsibility is making sure the public does not worry about their water source. And a big part of our process is to make sure that you're not worried about how your wastewater is treated. So the pipes and pumps that we buy, pipes, pumps, people, and chemicals is where we spend our money, right? So we've got to make sure we're ordering stuff. So I can't say, give me one pipe, it's going to last me six months or a year. So I think our reordering structure is very different across what these two gentlemen, and they can speak to it, but it's very fascinating. So I don't know if I can answer your question, but just
my observation is that the inventory is up over 50%.
A lot of those
1 year to
orders,
the next.
a lot of those orders are COVID orders coming in. So like Honeywell had like a
2023,
like an 80-week lead time on meters. We had 65-week lead times on valves. So they put in orders years ago that are now actually being produced. And like our
meters,
our water meter replacement program, now we have 40,000 water meters that are in the buildings because now they've all showed up. So the orders, some of those orders have been in for years. Our pipe orders were put in years ago. Our meter orders, ERTs, which are the reading devices, our regulator software, that one took years. So that year you had multi-year lead times. Now they've all caught up in factories, and now we're going to pack everything off that's used it.
So the inventories
go down. Yeah, let's go down. Like street lighting transformers, I think they're 2 or 3 year lead times. So because everybody in the whole world wanted to get their stuff, they put in giant orders everywhere.
You will see with the wastewater inventory, some of those things may go up, right? Because we try to keep in inventory anything that's directly related to compliance that has a long lead time. Because I can't afford to have a takedown for several months or several weeks, right? So those things that have a long lead time of, and I think of a long lead time of anything of 12 weeks, that we will bring that in, move that inventory up because of it.
I think those pipes are 50 inches. You definitely can't order those tomorrow.
But no, yeah, any kind of maintenance item, like you may see in the warehouse items sit there and 50% of them haven't been used in this many years. But when like a 36-inch valve breaks, you're not going to get it. So it'll sit on the shelf for 5 years, 10 years. You never order it, you never use it. But if the water line going to Hanover at the Diamond District breaks, you need to be able to fix it. So you have a lot that just sits there because you have thousands of miles of maintenance of all different sizes from the last 100 years.
See, this has been very helpful. Both of you. Awesome.
The takeaway though is we need accurate inventory data to make business decisions. That is the takeaway of both of these audits.
Why don't we move to the wastewater?
So as we had mentioned, this is phase 2 of the citywide warehouse audit. It is focusing on the wastewater treatment plant warehouse. As it said here, they do provide critical parts and supplies to keep the plant operating to prevent shutdowns of the operation. Just a little background with them. They also have the dedicated staff that oversees the warehouse. And then their inventory is actually tracked in a system called MainSaver. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Welsh. All conclusion as well as the audit.
Overall conclusion, just like at the main warehouse, opportunities for improvement exist. We found inadequate oversight, monitoring of inventory, purchases, supplies, and materials, leading to unaccounted for inventory, inaccurate, unreliable data, inventory overstocking, and circumvention of the city's procurement and payment processes, all of which expose the city to significant risk. Finding number 1, the wastewater treatment plant warehouse inventory lacks adequate oversight, resulting in significant financial discrepancy. Over $500,000 worth of inventory is stored outside of the warehouse, not managed nor monitored. In addition, 821,000 total purchases were not properly reported. Finding number 2, the city's competitive procurement requirements were circumvented, resulting in at least $45,000 in unnecessary costs. This matter has been referred to the Office of Inspector General for further review. Finding number 3, the city's contract general terms and conditions were not adhered to, and vendors were paid approximately $362,000 prior to providing goods and services. We found 2 instances. The services referenced in finding 2 were paid in advance. We also found another instance where a good was remitted for payment prior to being received in a warehouse. Finding 4, the inventory data is inaccurate and incomplete, and the true dollar value of the inventory is unknown. Cost data was missing for 23% of the inventory items. Finding number 5, improvements are needed in the inventory count process to ensure the accuracy of inventory records. Under the current process, 82 items valued at over $500,000 on the inventory report will never be counted. We know this because these items are stored outside of the warehouse, not being managed. Finding number 6, inventory monitoring needs improvement to maintain optimum inventory levels and to avoid excessive purchasing. 730 items exceeded, a significant amount of inventory items did not have established minimum, maximum, or reorder points. And we noted approximately 51% of the inventory items had not been requisitioned or received after the warehouse for at least 5 years. Step number 7, access levels in the MainSaver system need to be reviewed for appropriateness to ensure alignment with job duties and responsibilities. Inventory data was edited by 2 DPU employees without warehouse-related responsibilities. Finding number 8, policies and procedures that govern the warehouse and inventory management function are not in place. In conclusion, we issued 18 recommendations, 8 of which were high priority, 2 of which have been since closed with 100% concurrent. Recommendations include the following: process to define stock and non-stock items, the process to ensure all items are tracked on work per order, also to conduct a full inventory count, and a process to review MainSaver user access. Any questions?
Any further comments you got to make on this?
I think we will say that the inventory count process is already started. We have since made the leadership changes from the main warehouse to the wastewater treatment warehouse. And as far as the monitoring is concerned, I think a lot of this equipment is big, so it cannot fit in the warehouse. It must be in kind of a lay down yard. But we do agree with the auditor's findings. The piece that has been referred to the IG software, I think that is already a discussion that's underway. They've had some conversations and we're waiting to see what they're finding.
Any further comments from the city administration on this? I've had questions from the committee. Any question? We covered a lot of these issues in our earlier discussion. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for reporting.
The thought we're speaking.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is, general update. Memo Center.
If you see on your slide presentation there, you've got currently 20 open cases. We've closed out 4, 3 of them with substantiated findings, 1 unsubstantiated findings. And since the last reporting, we've added 2 additional cases. 2 of them are referred over to federal agencies. We also have 1 local law enforcement agency as well. That's not depicted on here. And that one is, and that has to do with some of the warehouse issues as well. But that's still open. We can't really discuss too much, but that is with local law enforcement as well. But we're hoping to see something soon out of that one, probably in the next 20 to 30 days. So more to follow on that. Here, next slide. The substantiated cases that we closed out. One most recent was the case we had with the registrar's office. We had 26 total allegations that were made. Of those 20, about 26, 25 came back substantiated, and they were a multitude of items, fraud, use of authority, and waste of government resources, from computers to emails to the purchase card, use of security companies. It was pretty well visible in the news here in the last 2.5+ weeks, to include the report. Long time working on the case. It took a lot of review, a lot of rewrites, but we finally got it done. We got it done right. A well product that was all backed by solid evidence that was achieved during the investigation. We do want to thank some of the members there at the registrar's office. A lot of them didn't want to come forward, but once this investigation started, came forward with some very important information and issues that were going on that we had to refer over to HR to assist and help those employees out. But it took a lot of courage for them to come forward and provide the information that was provided throughout the investigation. Because there was a lot of fear of retaliation. There was fear of, will anything come out of this investigation? And if nothing does come out of it, then they were very fearful of retaliation. So it took a lot of courage, and we're glad they were able to come forward and do what they did. And we're talking a multitude of employees, to include the initial whistleblower. So it was a great effort amongst that whole department there. And then we closed out another one that involved the city auditor's office. This was an interesting case because the city auditor, an employee had provided possible alleged fraudulent documentation for sick leave, identified very quick by the auditor, and said, hey, nobody's above the rules here. And came to us right away with the under disclosure, and we opened up the investigation, looked at it, found that yes, it was true. There was a fraudulent paperwork submitted that we substantiated and sent back to the auditor's office for closeout. So that was, you got both my office and the auditor's office that do a lot of oversight, looks, and investigation, but we also hold ourselves accountable as well with our own. No one is above the rules. So we appreciate the auditor stepping forward and following the rules of disclosure and bringing it to us and allowing us to effectively do an investigation. Third substantiated case was with the Department of Public Utilities. It was an abuse of time issue. A lot of great cooperation. The supervisor came forward with this disclosure, using the disclosure clause, came to us with it and felt, hey, I think this is happening. We have some evidence that it may be happening. We went ahead and spent a good month and a half looking into it, working with the 2 supervisors down there at And it was true, yes, there was an employee that was taking a government vehicle back to their residence outside of the city during work hours and staying there. Not doing work or just abusing their and wasting government resources during the time. So that was substantiated. It was sent back down to DPU and they took all appropriate actions. I think they're in pre-dis currently with that. But again, single employee, yes. But again, it was a supervisor who identified that they believed this was going on. And instead of trying to take the matters into their own hand and doing investigative work, they used the rules of disclosure and sent it over to us. And we were able to get their help to do the job, but we did it, knocked it out, got it back to DPU to say, hey, here's what we found. Whatever appropriate action you think needs to be taken, but they took the appropriate action to avoid, not just avoid the continued waste of government resource, but also to identify to others there, hey, we're not going to tolerate it, right? And what that has done, and we've seen this in a previous case, is it was one of the cases where we had a lot of equipment that was taken to include fictitious contracts that were made up. We briefed it briefly in the last audit committee, and we had the $600,000 restitution. Well, when things like that occur, what we see is some of this missing equipment all of a sudden starts to reappear and it comes back into the yard. But it's alerting, yeah, but it's alerting employees, especially in this case when the supervisor comes forward, is that hey, we're not tolerating. So we're all trying to clean up. We're trying to prevent these things from happening. So it's not only a measure that we have found it, but it's also a measure that we're preventing it down the road. So again, it was a supervisor coming forward. So we did really appreciate that coming forward and working together with us. And then it's also important to know that we also have unsubstantiated cases. People make allegations against individuals. And I think we're making this change where in the past it hadn't been done. I think it's very important that those allegations that are made against individuals, that we unsubstantiate them and they become public to understand it. We're also doing the right thing. We can make allegations against individuals, but these individuals they're in the 98 to 99% of people who are doing everything right in the city. And it needs to be shown that yes, hey, we have substantiate allegations as well. And this was an allegation that came forward where they believed there was a series of nepotism going on and that an individual was a family member that was being supervised by a family member. So we dug a little deeper into it and found out, no, they're not in the line of supervision, that it was an family member. Yes, they're family members, but this family member was a trainer, was training the new employees in this department, and they were not in the line of supervision and found that it did not violate any of the admin reg 5.17, and we unsubstantiated the case and sent it back down to the department. So we want to make sure that it's important that people understand. We also unsubstantiate.
Are there substantiated cases, the reports that you prepare, they public?
All of them are public. So that was one of the changes we made here this past summer. There was a news article that came out that did all, they took all the credit for it. Ever since the state has found, and one of the many reasons, but one of the things we wanted to do within the city is protect whistleblowers. And if you've seen how our caseloads in the past 4 years have almost tripled to what they used to be, a lot of that had to do with we're protecting whistleblowers. We want people to understand they can come forward without the fear of retaliation. And if there is retaliation, that there's a process to protect them from that. We didn't have a policy in state that protected those whistleblowers. The state came out with state statutes about 2 years now, Caitlin, right? Yeah, about 2 years now, that the state came out with a state statute to protect whistleblowers. And it's across the entire state, not just city employees, but it's also for citizens as well that have been retaliated against. So with that, we've re-looked at that policy on our postings of all of our reports, and all the reports are posted now, to include unsubstantiated reports. Because then the unsubstantiated reports, I think, are just as important as the substantiated reports to be visible by the public. So yes, they're all on our website, currently on the website.
Good. Any questions or comments? Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it very much. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the audit plan status report. Yeah.
Yes. So here we have the audit plan. These are the audits that are currently in progress. We still have the streetlight maintenance audit. We issued phase one, as you all know, a deep dive into the expenditures. There is phase two coming, focused on the efficiency and effectiveness, essentially, of the streetlights and the maintenance program. We're still working through that. There might have to be some additional contracts reviewed under the streetlight division, given our current findings and some of the concerns we're seeing as we do some review. Our warehouse audit that never ends, going on in all the multiple phases. We have I think we're trying to wrap it up in 4 phases at this point. 2 more audits. The additional warehouses aren't as big as DPU, so it shouldn't be as much time. So we're trying to finish those last 2 phases relatively quickly. We're working on our budget and the non-departmental process, looking into how non-departmental funds for charitable organizations are awarded to the city. That one, we're aiming for January, where we'll have that issued. If not January, early February, it should be the next meeting we should be able to discuss that report. We're still working through the purchasing card audit. There's, working through a lot of different issues and things we're finding, and we're trying to wrap that one up soon. I've thrown Tram's actually joined on to that audit when she started, so I've thrown more resources to work through the purchasing card program. Our retirement system audit is that one again. Rob is actually managing that one currently. That one we also believe by January or early February we'll be able to issue a report on that one. The fleet fuel usage audit, we have some significant findings on that we're working through. That one we're kind of in the end of testing. That one might be issued March, April timeframe currently is what we're looking at, depending on how things go. Our top guard audit of the security contract, contract auditing is very important, as you guys probably have seen and understand. And so that one's still in planning. We're working through it. Leanne's actually has the lead on that particular audit. So we're still going through, she's kind of rolling off one, rolling heavy into the other. And of course, our quarterly open recommendations follow-up is always ongoing. The next batch is coming at the end of December. I think we're gonna have the draft out by it. And so the final will probably be early January. And we've completed our external audit assistance. Go to the next slide. So we've had some changes to the audit plan, obviously, because we have now instituted a more in-depth, detailed approach, which means less audits, but audits that dive deeper into root causes, issues, so we can really identify and fix those issues. So we cut down on what we think we'll be able to initiate for the rest of the year. First up there, we have the meals tax follow-up audit. It's actually going to be the personal. I met with Ms. White last week. It's going to be the personal property tax follow-up audit through RVA Pay, just because they're still working through meals tax. We don't want to audit something that the findings aren't really going to be useful. Personal property taxes has been processed through RVA Pay, and we're looking at about April-ish timeframe to start that audit. We have our continuous audit, which you guys have seen every year. We're making significant changes to that. We're trying to really bolster that a little bit more, use data to identify problems even better, to guide us in a risk-based approach. Rob's taking the lead, our new IT audit manager, on helping us use that data to find issues that we'll focus in on. And so we want to start that, probably going to start that actually in January when we get back. We do want to start the fire and emergency services payroll audit. That's one of our issues we found in our risk assessment, and that was requested by council members for us to look at. So we have that still on the plan. Overtime compliance, it should be, we're hoping a relatively quick audit. There's a new policy in place that Mr. Saunders put in place earlier this year. We want to verify compliance with that policy, and we're hoping that'll be a quick audit that we can turn around. We have another contract audit, trying to do a lot more contract audits of ACOM is on the plan. We haven't started that yet. It will probably be a large audit because there's a lot of expenditures there. That might start later towards the end of the year. And then our cybersecurity audit is we plan on starting that January as we normally do. Next slide. So we have some audits on here that I call them pending reassessment. In the plan, if you remember last time, we noted that audits can be removed, added, replaced, depending on what's happening, depending on where the risk really is, right? We don't want to audit something because we said 6 months ago, hey, we think this is a good idea. Then the risk changes to something else and we're auditing the wrong thing. So these are, we've pegged as pending reassessment. Doesn't mean my team and I are going to meet in January to determine which are the best audits moving forward that should be conducted and what should roll into the next plan. And then we'll send a memo out to the audit committee so you're kind of aware of what the finalization for the rest of the year has been determined to be. So on here, we have the APA cost comparative analysis is a good one. I think you need a more robust analysis there. I think it was mentioned at the last audit committee. We might go to a multi-year approach instead of 1 year at a time, maybe 2 years at a time as we look at the data and the trends. The miscellaneous vendor, I think it was mentioned earlier, there's going to be its own audit. I think, you know, based on the risk we're seeing, we might roll that back into continuous the way we used to have it. Still assess it, but it'll be able to do it in a faster, reporting structure than its own risk, like its own process, which would take longer to get to the results. So we may keep that in the continuous audit. And we had some ARPA follow-up we want to do. If we don't do it, start something this fiscal year, it'll certainly happen next fiscal year. It just will be shifted and prioritized. I guess unless administration has a concern there. And then Affordable Housing Trust Fund audit, that'll be shifted as well. To the last slide. And then here are some of the new projects that are being considered or that are already ongoing as to why we're shifting around. Obviously, the Streetlight Division Phase 2, as well as additional contracts in the Streetlight Division are being reviewed. Additional phases of the warehouse, as we mentioned, all committee meeting. And then in the warehouse audit, we noted that we do want to assess some of the DPU's procurement practices, especially regarding small purchases. We may try to work that in this year. We'd like to. So we're trying to work it if we can. Administration has requested an audit of the Diamond District expenditures. The project is starting up. There hasn't been a large amount of expenditures yet, so we're going to get it right. I think we're at about 10 million last time we talked. And so they asked us, hey, let's get it right now so we don't have a huge problem later. Let's get off the controls starting right so we don't have to come in and fix things later. And we think that's actually a great idea. So we're really going to try to work that one in this year if we can. As you probably guessed, we're doing a lot of support, investigative support and inspector general support. Spending a lot of our time doing investigative support moving forward now and moving forward. So we have to make time for that as well. We're working with the IG and any other law enforcement agencies. And there'll be requests we imagine from Richmond's new mayor. I've spoken to him a couple times and kind of finalized what any concerns he has that he would want us to deep dive into specifically. We're trying to keep a window open for any requests that may come in. So by early next year, we'll send out a memo kind of saying, but here's kind of where we decided the real risk is and the priorities are. And of course, you guys can always reach out, administration can reach out if there's any concerns, we can try to shift the approach so that it makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So for the ARPA, the spending deadline for ARPA is December 31st. So we just had our last council meeting of the year and we made a couple budget transfers, adjustments, whatever, in the ARPA portfolio. So you guys have this as a pending thing, but I think the original intent of doing the audit was just to sort of double check, make sure everything that we're sending to the feds reporting is being done the right way. And I don't know, I know that was our spending deadline was I'm sorry, but then when do we send the final report? We have another year?
Yeah, we have another year.
Okay.
Yeah, and we want, you're right, we have some time. We actually wanted that audit was to focus in on the sub-recipients are using the money appropriately.
Yes.
The first audit was kind of, okay, is the right category.
Yeah.
But now, again, it goes back to grant management and the same as contract. We're giving all this ARPA money out, and the question is, we want to make sure that who's getting it is using it appropriately and for the right reasons. Right. That's kind of what those audits are kind of more to be focused in on.
Okay. So is your all's plan to do that before we submit so you can catch anything before we submit the final report to the feds?
Yeah, so it's probably not based on, again, we have to reassess where we believe the best resources are to be used. And you know, it's still up for debate as to what we should do. If administration has a concern, we can certainly jump in and look at that, you know, within the fiscal year. And that's kind of what that reassessment period in January is about. Where should we really focus in to give the most, you know, bang for the buck?
Okay. I mean, I wasn't super involved in it, but I remember when Lou was here and you guys did that work, that a couple things were caught and we shifted around dollars to make sure we were compliant.
Yeah.
And that in part was with CARES where we were doing it like in the 9 months of that, like we do, that was a much faster spend period, right? Like we were strictly under emergency declaration. So there was a lot moving very quickly. And so, you know, we really appreciate Lou catching that stuff so we could adjust it before we submitted it and ended up in any sort of repayment situation. So, but I do know that, you know, we've had more guidance, I think, for Treasury with ARPA than we had with CARES. So a lot of it was, you know, they were 8 months into it before they sent us the guidance for how we should have been doing it. You know, that's just the
and ARPA is much more open-ended. I don't believe it's as risky in the categories because it's a lot more, it really is a lot more broad and it's been a lot more time to work through it. You know, we kind of believe that the risk really isn't more on you're getting the money now, or you're doing the right things with it.
Right.
You know, that you were granted essentially to do.
Okay.
That's kind of where our risk was focused on.
Okay.
Great. Anything else? Any other questions? Great, thank you. Okay, we'll now turn to new business, and the first item on that agenda is the electronic communications policy. This was an email that I think everyone got in early November from Riyadh. I resent it this morning just in case it slipped off the radar screen. But it involves establishing a policy for the Audit Committee to have virtual meetings to the extent that we would like to have virtual meetings. And importantly, when an Audit Committee member cannot be here, there's a way in which a committee can participate virtually. And Caitlin Weston of the City Attorney's Office is going to give us just a quick overview of what's involved.
Yes, I absolutely will, but I also want to give the administration the opportunity to leave if you don't want to hear about our policy. No one? No takers? I really thought you guys were going to be running out the door. So yes, Virginia Code sets guidelines for the Audit Committee and for using the use of electronic communications for meetings, whether it's remote participation or holding fully virtual meetings. If you do desire to be able to hold either virtual meetings or participate remotely, then it does require you annually to adopt a policy. So I'll just quickly go over some of the most noteworthy things about the policy, and then we can take a vote. So first, the reasons for remote participation that you're allowed to use, it's for a personal matter. If there's a temporary or permanent disability, if you're caring for a family member, or if you live more than 60 miles away. You have to provide notice 7 days before your request to participate remotely. And electronic participation must be pre-approved by the Audit Committee. You need a quorum to vote on that participation. You'll need a motion, and if the motion is approved or denied, that'll be notated in the minutes. One thing to note about the use of a personal matter as your justification for remote participation is you cannot do that more than 2 times each calendar year. If the body decides.
For calling on help. If this is a medical emergency, please hang up and dial 911.
Everyone okay? If the body would like to have all virtual public meetings, again, that can only be done twice per year. They can't be consecutively. Your notice will have to show that it will be an all virtual meeting. There has to be an opportunity for public access. There has to be an opportunity for public comment. If there's closed session, we've done a remote closed session together, but it's that same scenario where the teams will sort of boot out the people who are not allowed in. and then allow us to have the closed session. And then we'll have to note in all of our meetings, in all of our minutes about those virtual meetings. Are there any questions, or do we just want to move to the?
Let me just add a comment. We have been doing what are called hybrid meetings. And hybrid meetings are fine, but a member of the audit committee cannot participate other than like a member of the public and can't vote or otherwise even comment during a hybrid meeting, which is the reason that we really wanted to go to an official policy that in the event that an audit committee member cannot be here for whatever reason, we go through the steps that are necessary that they can participate as though they are here. And so that's a big reason behind this. I don't think the audit committee will very often take advantage of the total virtual process, but sure would have been good to have had during the height of COVID. So are there any questions on this policy? There's a copy in front of you, notes. Yes.
The only question I have is that on D1, it says we must notify the chair and the office of the city auditor by email at least 7 days before the meeting. If you're sick or something, you're probably not going to know 7 days before. Is there any flexibility on that?
There definitely could be. I don't believe that this is required by Virginia State Code. I think this was a choice by the committee.
Okay.
So I think there could be flexibility. I think mostly we're concerned about Riyadh having the opportunity to know who is and is not.
Yeah, we need a quorum. That's the real. So if you let us, you're sick, it's fine. It's not an issue. We just really, it's like, as much notice as possible. If you know you're going to be out of town for something, we just want to know in advance. So we can make sure we're going to have a quorum. We can proceed appropriately as early as possible.
Right.
But if last minute sick, I think that happens all the time. That's not really.
Would you like to change it, see if the two will move it all together? If it's not required.
I mean, I would say, I think it would be better, like written communication as soon as possible or something like that.
Communication before the day of the meeting, and then it's not adequate.
Reasonable effort.
Yeah, yeah. I think it needs to be a little looser because most of the time remote participation is because something, a car is broken down, a child is sick, something's going on that you cannot.
Why don't we just make it before the day of the meeting?
Okay.
That should give us plenty of opportunity. So we'll strike the words at least 7 days. All right, good catch. Thank you, Christian. Any other comments on this? Okay, do I have a motion that the document in front of you with the deletion of the words we just mentioned be approved by the committee?
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Last item on the agenda, and I think this is the finance department. We have some new staff members you want to introduce to us.
Sure, I'll start, then I'll turn it over to Sheila. So this is part of our continuous improvement process, looking at staffing throughout several of the departments that were low in staff. And what are the key areas that we need to fill? The customer service is a very big area, but big shifts for us, all across the city. But a lot of it is happening in finance, from where complicated bills, people who are answering the phones, even 311's getting a full makeover. But with finance, so most of you may not know, Sheila's actually 3 department heads in one, because she's Commissioner of Revenue, Treasurer, and the Finance Director. Other localities, it's 3. So there was some additional high-level staffing support that she needed. So we brought on a Revenue Director, and we've hired for the Deputy Director of Revenue as well. So that's Jamie, and I'll let Sheila get into their qualifications, and Thomasina. So we're very happy that they are here with us. Sheila's smiling a lot more these days, looking a lot happier. So turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sabrina. So Jamie comes to us from the city of Austin, Texas, and I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about herself. She had an opportunity to meet the Finance Committee in our last meeting, late November, but wanted her to also introduce herself to the Audit Committee. So Jamie?
Hi, team. Jamie Atkinson. As Sheila said, most recently I've been in Texas for the last 14 years. I'm originally from Virginia, went to school at Christopher Newport and William and Mary. And then I'm just excited to be back. As Sheila said, Sabrina said, we have a lot of work to do in the revenue department, and I'm looking forward to improving our systems, our policies, our procedures, and improving our staffing while focusing on that customer service that our interactions with the public is.
Tell them a little bit about what you did at the City of Austin and the Metro.
Okay, so with the City of Austin, I worked in the city budget office. I worked on their fee schedule management team, led that team for about 8 years. And then I went over to the Austin Transit Partnership when that was stood up. So it was a local government corporation that was created. And so I was part of the finance team, sort of the rapid response team, went over, set the whole thing up. So that was a very exciting opportunity to create an organization from scratch, really create those policies, procedures, select systems to make sure that we were fulfilling our role and able to get the job done. So I'm excited to be here. Really looking forward to moving this department forward.
So before Thomasina goes on, I just want to say her position was brainchild of Lincoln Sanders before Lincoln pushed for that position created.
So we also have Thomasina, who comes to us from the district. Thomasina, could you stand up, tell us a little bit about it?
Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon. So I'm originally from Florida, Internal Revenue Service, collections, enforcement, criminal fraud, and then of course I rerouted to DC for an additional career opportunity with the tax and revenue department. So mainly my background is tax and revenue. Prior to that, banking and Citigroup, HSBC. And so I'm trying to bring all those things together to help, unite our agency and moving things forward.
So Washingtonian, DC, and
I think you should hire more people from Florida.
Very well. Thanks to both of you. Glad to have you. That is the last item that was on the agenda. Other than to remind everyone that our next meeting is on March the 11th. Make sure that is on your calendar. Is there any further business? Oh, yeah, Jim.
Thank Lincoln and DPW. They were, took us 3 years. Once Lincoln and DPW got involved, it was a totally different ballgame. They completely redid our office space. So we got a whole new office space on the 15th floor. We moved over from corner to corner. Did a phenomenal job. Kept it way under budget. It was a plan.
No P card issues.
Bad talk. It's good, but an incredible job they did, and we really greatly appreciate it. We were confined in a small space. We're a little bit open now. Bring in a couple more investigators. We really appreciate all that work.
Good. Great. Yes, sir.
I can't stress my appreciation for your leadership and for the audit committee. In my time, particularly in this role as chief administrative officer, it's felt incredibly collaborative, obviously, with both Mr. Lassiter and Mr. Ali, but also with the committee. I think you guys have listened to both the challenges and the opportunities that we see in front of us and have supported us in our path to get there. I think, and I will say, I'm probably the smilingest person in City Hall right now, and in part it's because I'm actually stepping back and seeing how good of a shape I think I'm getting the opportunity to leave it in with Sabrina.
And I'm the least smiling face.
But I just, it's been nice to kind of step back. We've gone from problem to problem and fire to fire for the last 4 years, and to kind of stop and really feel good about what we're doing. And I think what re-audit his team are bringing him with new focus and energy is only going to help us with getting to that, unattainable position, end of perfection. Comes to our controls and processes, but we're going to keep working. And I think our culture of continuous improvement is strong. And, the last comment I'll say is that I feel like a couple of years ago, and we would talk about issues in the department, we would talk about high turnover, high vacancies. And at the time, we were talking about it as a current challenge. I think for the next several years, this audit committee is going to be seeing and hearing cases that speak to that period of time when we had significant staffing challenges and high turnover, particularly during and at the end of the pandemic, like 2020, early 21, et cetera. But I can tell you from what I'm seeing in our new employee orientations, first of all, I don't think we're having a challenge finding talent anymore. We're seeing, the last two orientations have been, grown out of the HR training room, and we've had to find new space because it's 60 people being onboarded in a day. It's exciting, and again, credit to the team, particularly Sabrina and her team, that we've been able to implement VRS. The compensation has significantly changed. The benefits we're able to offer, whether it be the health clinics, tuition assistance, home buyer assistance, et cetera, is making a real difference. Going around that room and hearing people's backgrounds, where they're coming from, it's always exciting to hear the private sector, folks coming in, folks like Sheila White, who had, Capital One experience before coming to join our finance team. But, I will selfishly say it's also exciting to hear the number of people who are coming from the state. Was at last week's orientation, there was a gentleman who was joining us from the state police, from their support services side, not law enforcement, not sworn. And he would just said, I'm here because I keep hearing how much better it is to work for the city of Richmond now. And, what was relayed to me about, the benefits you're offering, et cetera, is better than what I had access to at the state. That's what we need to be, so that, future audit committees have a lot less on their plate.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
And thanks to you. I've always been very impressed, in particular, the way you have been receptive to criticism that comes out of these audits. Not of you personally, but of city processes and policies. Audits has done a great job, but you've always been very receptive and willing to work to see improvement, and I appreciate that.
Sir.
Best of luck to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.
Thank you. See you.